Welcome to Legal Knowledge-Dejure. Today I will be discussing the topic of promissory estoppel on contract law. Basically, promissory estoppel, it is an equitable doctrine that prevents someone from going back on his or her words. So to me, promissory estoppel is when someone promises you and you relied on the person's word to act. Therefore, that person can be stopped from going back on their word. This doctrine is basically about equity. There are requirements to promissory estoppel. For someone promised to be binding or to be fulfilled, or for that person to be stopped from going back on their words, there are requirements to be met. So the first requirement of promissory estoppel is clear promise. The clear promise should not be open to many interpretations. The second requirement is pre-existing legal relationship. So for promissory estoppel to be met, you have to consider that there should be a pre-existing contract, debt, or relationship that will make that person not to go back on their word. So it is important to know that promissory estoppel cannot be enforced if there is no pre-existing relationship, because for promissory estoppel to be met, there must be a contract before, there must be a debt before, there must be something that will bind that person not to go back on their word. That's why we say it can be, or it should be, pre-existing relationship that will bind someone. The next requirement is reliance. Relying is when a promise has been made to you and then you have relied on that promise. Once you have changed your position and acted, therefore that person can be stopped from going back on their word. The next requirement is inequity. Inequity arises when a promise has been made to you and the person has changed their word. That is, that person promised you that they will do this thing, and then at certain point in time, that person comes and say that that was just a mistake. Why you have changed your position and you have acted on the promise being made. When you have been treated unfairly, that's the time the doctrine can be termed as promissory estoppel. So having understood the doctrine of promissory estoppel and that of the requirements of promissory estoppel, so it is important to give you a practical example on this doctrine. So example of promissory estoppel can be in the case of a tenant and a landlord. You are renting from your landlord and the rent is 50 USD per month, and you have lived in that house for 1 year, 12 months, and throughout you have been paying 50 USD. But after the 1 year period, things are difficult for you and you cannot afford to pay 50 USD anymore. You are struggling to pay, and your landlord recognizes that. He tells you that you should pay 25 USD instead of 50 USD because things are not easy, and before you used to pay 50 USD and you agreed. You changed your position by paying 25 USD for 6 months each month, and he agreed. He accepted the amount. But after 1 month, he comes back to tell you that I was joking. And then he tells you you have to pay the balance amount. The law will stop your landlord from going back on his word. That's why we term promissory estoppel as an equitable doctrine that prevents someone from going back on their word. It's not for someone to be treated unfairly. That's what promissory estoppel is about. Thank you for watching. You can ask your question in the comment section. You will be responded to in a due time.